Okay. So everybody has your prayer book. If we can begin with our opening prayers. Gary, would you recite the opening prayers today? And please take your time in reciting. I think when we rush through this, it's not just an exercising and reading. It's more of a practice in understanding the meaning. So we should go slowly and deliberately and create mental images of what it is that we're reciting. So everybody should recite with them, although turn off your microphone so we don't feedback with each other. Gary, when you're ready, turn your microphone on, please.
Sorry, I thought that I had turned it on. It's English and Tibetan. What's the drill today?
Whatever you prefer.
3 times.
Whatever you wish to do.
Okay. I'll do twice in English and once in Tibetan. Is that okay? Okay. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in a state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagladang war jepe dra, no par jepe geg. Tharpa dang tham che kien pe bardu cho par je, pe tam che kit so je pe. Manam ka dang yam pe sem chen tam che de wa dang den. Du now dong drel nur du lana me pa yang dag par zog pe chang chu rin po che tho par ja. Action Bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De che du sang ma ge ki par du lu nagi sam ge wala ko. Ma she bar du lu nagi sam ge wala ko. Du de ring ne sung te ni ma sang da sam gi bar du lu nagi sam ge wala ko. Long Refuge prayer. 2 times in English, once in Tibetan. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yanas. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Idams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Rinchen sawa dang yu par che pe pel den lama dam pa nam la kyab su chi o. Idam kil korgi la so nam la kyab su chi o. Sangye chom den de nam la kyab su chi ho. Dam pe cho nam la kyab su chi ho. Bag pe jen dun nam la kyab su chi ho. Pawo kandro cho kong su me so gye she ki chen dang din pa nam la kyab su chi ho. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the past. Jang Chu Bing Por Chi Ki Bar Sangye Nam La Kyab Su Chi Cho Dang Jang Chub Sim Pai So La Yang De Shen Kyab Su Chi Ji Tar Nong Gi De Shi Ke Jang Chub Thu Ki Ni Ki Pa Dang Chang Chub Sim Pe La Pa La De Da Grim Shen Ne Pa Tar Dejan tro la fen don du jang chub sen ni ki gi shing. Dejan du ni la pa la rim pa jen du la parji. Short refuge prayer. And the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang so ki chognam la Changchu bardu dagni kyab su chi dagi junso ki pe so nam ki drola pinchir sange drub parsho. The Four Immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam ka dang yam pe sim chen tam che dewa dang de we gyu dang den par jur chi. Dug nao dang dug nao gi gu dang draw war ju chi. Dug nao me pe dewa dang mi draw war jur chi. Ne ring chak dang ni dang draw wei tang nyom la ne par jur chi.
Very good. Thank you. You've been practicing. That's good. The melodies are very good. Okay, so does anyone have any comments or questions about the opening prayers? Okay, very good. Welcome, Alex and Tommy, are with us. Good to see you both. Okay, so we're continuing our talk on the 9 yanas, the 9 vehicles to attain Buddhahood. So we've been talking about the first 2 in the purification, in the renunciation stage, would be the Shravaka and the Pratyeka Buddha. So those are both the Hinayana vehicle, part of the Hinayana vehicle, which is the fundamental discipline that the Buddha first taught about, and that we all need to be able to discipline ourselves and to be able to organize our thoughts, have a decent place to be able to do our practices and meditation and receive teachings, contemplation, and so on like that. To have the right tools, have the right books, to be wearing the right clothing that speaks to the seriousness of what it is that we are doing, and that we're taking everything with an aspiration to be able to break through our ordinary humanness into our transcendent humanness. So everything is an effort to be able to do that. And of course, we're dedicating all the wisdom and merit that we are able to attain as we're moving along this vehicle path. We're dedicating this all to the enlightenment of all other beings. We're not selfishly holding it for ourselves. Although we do need, in the beginning, we do need to concentrate on ourselves first and to be able to get a degree of stability. And with that stability, then we can start working to help other beings and so on. But it's important for us to get that stability. So that's what we're working on now. As we move along this path of renunciation, which is renouncing the world, not completely becoming, this kind of ascetic that takes off all his clothes and goes into the forest and meditates all day and so on like that. It doesn't have to be that kind of an extreme, but it has to be a common sense approach where here we are living in the West, and we can incorporate some of these techniques where we can take a weekend, where we take a few hours, where we take a few minutes each day, whatever it is, to devote to our practice, to devote to our study, to devote to receiving teachings, whether it's reading a book or listening to something that's been recorded on YouTube or something like that. So creating this kind of discipline to allow ourselves to do that is how we can progress. So, so this renunciation is really a way to be able to say, I'm going to renounce getting into all the mundane, everyday things that I normally would be wasting my time on. And I'm going to spend that time and my energy resources into developing this transcendent nature that I have within myself, that I'm aspiring to be able to stabilize. So the next part of the renunciation is the Bodhisattva path. The Bodhisattva path is, Bodhisattva is 3 Sanskrit words. Bodhi means enlightenment, Sat is a being, and Va is a holy being. So it's the holy enlightened being. So as we enter onto the path of becoming a Buddha, that we go through these stages of first becoming a practitioner, and then a practitioner then becomes a yogi or a yogini. A yogini would be a female yogi, and one who is in union, who has crossed a threshold of now really recognizing the union of our true nature, with ourselves, with our humanness and so on, and being able to recognize that. And we become aware of that on this path, we become a complete human being. So we become a yogi or a yogini. And then from there, then we become a bodhisattva. We move through the stages of becoming a bodhisattva. And there's 10 stages we talk about called the bhumis. So it's rather advanced, but we can study these and we can begin to experience them like a circle, a spiral that is going up, going up, going up, and getting to the very top where we reach the threshold of becoming a Buddha. So each time the spiral goes round, it keeps going round until we're able to kind of break through some kind of limitation, some kind of boundary, some kind of mental construct that we've been holding on to. And then it's like a gateway that opens up, and then we go up to the next level, to the next part of the spiral. And the circle on that spiral becomes smaller, becomes quicker. It becomes more compact. And then there's another gateway and we break through to the next one, and so on and so on and so on until we get to the top. So if we think about our progress as a spiral progress, it's very helpful in understanding and developing confidence in what it is that we're doing. So being on the Bodhisattva path is a big part of that, because now we truly are engaging in these teachings and practices for the benefit of others, where we've broken through the limitation of our ego. We're moving through and being able to help other beings and finding that we have wisdom within ourselves, because in the Shravaka stage and the Pratyeka Buddha stage, we had some breakthroughs there. And we're able to now use those experiences of what were blockages for us. We're able to use those experiences to be able to help other beings, whether it's to be able to clear away in our mind and our speech and helping them, or to recognize what their blockages and their limitations are, and to become not just sympathetic. Sympathetic might mean that we have pity on them or something like that, but to become empathetic, to have empathy for them, to recognize, oh yes, this is something that I feel too. This is something I've experienced too. However, I've maybe have found a way to break through that, and maybe by helping them through my empathy with them, I can talk to them one-on-one and be able to help them in a profound way. So this is all part of this Bodhisattva Yana, this Bodhisattva vehicle, this pathway of being a Bodhisattva. So how do we define, we just said that the Bodhisattva is the holy enlightened being. So the Bodhisattva is the hero, is the ideal of the Mahayana path. The first path we talked about was the Hinayana. Now we're talking about the Mahayana. The Mahayana is the great path, the great vehicle. Maha means great, and Yana is the vehicle. So this is the great path. And so most of when we think of Buddhism, most of Buddhism is in this Mahayana path. And there's many different cultures that are within this, from different nations and so on. They may dress differently. They might have slightly different practices, but their prayers are basically going to be the same exact prayers that we use today, that we recited today, that they are based on prayers that have come from Buddha Shakyamuni and from the masters who came after Buddha Shakyamuni. So these prayers are very, very old. And the one reason why we recite these in the Tibetan or the Sanskrit, sometimes we recite these in Sanskrit, is because during this time, the Buddha was teaching in Sanskrit. And these Sanskrit words, these Sanskrit sounds, these have great meaning to them just in hearing them, just in allowing them to vibrate within our body. So when we are reciting these prayers in the Tibetan or the Sanskrit, we are connecting with that aspiration, with that accomplishment of Buddha Shakyamuni and all the masters and teachers and disciples that have all come in the past 2,600 years, all coming together. So it's very powerful. And as we really engage in these practices and we really engage in reciting these mantras and these prayers and so on, we'll begin to feel that power. We'll begin to feel that connection. But it doesn't come by whispering these things. It comes by being very forceful and saying these things out loud. Deshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu nagi some ge wa ko. Ma she bar du lu nagi some ge wa ko. Du de ring ne sung te ni ma sang da some gi bar du lu nagi some ge wa la ko. And knowing the English meaning, what it means to us, but also reciting it in this way because it's like a language that really cuts through because it has these vibrations to it that cut through and our body becomes our physical body, our intellectual body, our spiritual body, all come together. So the illustration I always like to use, it's like a key that fits into a lock and the lock springs open. So the lock is what's locking up our heart center. And the key is our physicality, our physical body, and our intellectual body. And when we make it all come together, the spiritual body, our true nature, opens up. So developing confidence in doing this, learning the mantra recitations, learning the melodies is a huge part of this. And you shouldn't feel like somebody's listening to you and is going to be judging you on what your voice quality is or something like that. You do this by yourself. You can listen to the recordings to help you and so on. And when we're together in the room, in the shrine room, nobody's listening to each other. We're all harmonizing together. And that's where the power is. And we should recall that at any given time throughout the world, there's hundreds of thousands of people, or maybe even millions of people who are reciting these prayers and these mantras and these recitations and so on, all at the same time. So we are connecting with them. They're connecting with us. We're harmonizing with this vibration that all of us are part of. So keeping these things in mind are all part of what it is to be a Bodhisattva, a holy enlightened being. So another feature of the Mahayana path, of the great path, is called the middle way. These are the middle way teachings. So back in the day of the Buddha and all these masters, and there were many, many teachers. You got to remember, 2,600 years ago, the heroes of the cultures of society were these learned spiritual beings. They didn't have baseball. They didn't have basketball. They didn't have financial wizards. They didn't have presidents and so on. And they didn't have all these figurative heroes that they could aspire to be like and so on, and to be able to adore and to be able to give presents to and so on like that. Their heroes were these spiritual figures. So there were lots of them. And there's lots of different ways in which these masters are teaching. And there's extremes that they're bouncing off of. Some might be extreme on this side, some extreme on that side, some extreme here and extreme there, and so on like that. So recognizing that all of this confusion ensues as a result of that, how do I bring this all together? And so the Buddha, with his great wisdom, was able to say, you do it through the middle way. You don't go to any of the extremes. You may be aware of the extremes. You may be aware of what's being said. You may be aware of what's being practiced and so on. And you may try that a little bit and engage into it as much as you need to, but don't let yourself go to those extremes. Bring it to the middle. So what does that mean? What is the middle? How do we define these extremes and so on? So there's 4 basic extremes that we should focus on. And if you're taking notes, this is something to take notes about, because it becomes something that we refer to over and over again and will help you in your practice, will help you in your contemplations. So these 4 extremes, the first 2 extremes are, on one side is nihilism, and the other side is eternalism. Now, I'm sure we can look up in the dictionary many different ways to define these, but generally speaking, nihilism is believing that there's nothing but where we are right now. There's nothing outside of us. There's nothing inside of us. There's no judgment. Everything that we do is just because we want to do it. And we're not going to be held accountable for anything that we do. There's not, that it doesn't believe in karma, doesn't practice karma, cause and result. It doesn't have a sense of anything that is a reciprocity of our actions. If we do good deeds are going to come to us. If we do bad deeds are going to come to us. If we have bad deeds, but we mitigate it with good deeds, that they're going to neutralize. There's none of that. There is a sense of morality. There can be a sense of morality that comes out of our human nature to be good. So there are those who are nihilists who still have a code of ethics, who have a code of morality to live by. And that's to be respected. You know, we can see that. But there are many people who don't seem to have that at all. They're just completely going through life with wanton abandon and getting all that they can from as many people as they can, and very selfishly lead their lives and so on. So this is a general description of nihilism. On the other side of that spectrum, on the other side of that extreme, is eternalism. In eternalism, everything is predestined. That eternally we will be fine. There will be judgment that will allow us to get whatever rewards we need. There will be universal forgiveness for everything that we do, regardless of what it is, and that we'll be eternally happy, eternally satisfied like that. So we can look at our Western philosophies, our Western religions, we can look at our Eastern religions, and many of them have these very strong eternalistic parts of them, elements within them. You know, sometimes we might refer to this as the soul, S-O-U-L, that there is this soul that is like a shadow of who we are. And if we do good deeds, that shadow becomes a positive force in our lives and other people's lives. But if we're doing negative things, that shadow becomes stained and becomes, is being pulled down, being held down by these negativities and so on. But that there is this eternalism, that we will eternally be in some kind of a heaven, that we will eternally be in some kind of hell, or all the different things in between that there are these kinds of places that this eternalism is carried out in. In Buddhism, we talk about that there's 6 human realms. And these realms are the psychophysical drama of being a human being. Sometimes we think that we are human gods. Sometimes we think we are human titans, very powerful beings. Sometimes we think we are human animals. Sometimes we think we are human, miserable, what we call hungry ghosts who are never ever satisfied, insatiable beings. Sometimes we are human hell beings who, as humans, we're caught in this constant fight for survival, this constant fight for life, but we're always being annihilated. We're always being killed. And then we recover from that killing only to be killed over and over and over and over again. So this is being a human being. This is called the psychophysical drama of being a human being. So being a human being, being a natural human being, is one of those 6 realms where we can see that at any given time, we're some combination of all those 6 realms together and so on. And we have to take responsibility for that. We have to learn what causes all those thought processes that puts us in those realms and so on, and to be able to apply the antidotes to be able to purify those things. So when we get to the next path, that's the path of purification. So we'll talk some more about that. But right now we're on this path of renunciation, and we're trying to stay away from those extremes. So this eternalism speaks of everything's going to be okay. I don't have to take any responsibility because everything's going to be okay anyway. And many people, maybe you have thought that, or maybe you've been part of some kind of a group of people who think those ways. In the middle way, we take responsibility for everything. We take personal responsibility for our happiness. We take personal responsibility for our sorrow, for our suffering, and anything in between. So we have to learn how all these things are activated, what these things are, why these things are there, and how it is that we work with these things. What, why, and how are the 3 things that we're always using to analyze who we are and what we're doing. Does anybody have any questions about anything I've said so far? I want to make sure that you're engaged in the conversation. So if you have any thoughts or you need to speak about something, please do it now. Okay, everybody's feeling good? You can follow what I'm saying? Okay. Is it making sense? Can you relate to it? Okay. So now the other 2 extremes, nihilism, extremism. Now there's one here and there's one here. So you can see that there's these 4 all coming together in the center. So the other 2, one of them is individualism or egoism. I, me, mine. Everything revolves around me. I am the most important. It's my game. I'll play it the way I want to play it. Everything is me. And everything I have is mine. And if I don't need to share it with anybody if I don't want to. And many people will say that, I need to be the strongest person I can be. All this is, the world is my oyster. And I can find the pearl in the oyster. I am that pearl in the oyster. All this is my cake and I'll eat it too. That I'm the most important. So there's a lot of books that have been written about this. There's a couple of authors that I know are well known, who their whole philosophy is based on the I, me, mine. I first, me first. You are entitled to get as much as you can. So that is a very extreme view. On the other side of that spectrum, is materialism, or substantialism, which means that all this physical stuff is there for the taking, is there for me to take. And that the winner is the I who has all these things. All these things. If I acquire all these things, I may have a weak self-image of myself, but I can compensate for that by having all these things. And now people have respect for me just by virtue that I got all these trophies, I've got all these things and so on that can be identified with being who I am and my success in life and so on. So you probably know people who are like that. Maybe in your own life, you've been very self-centered and that I, me, mine has been very strong in your life. And maybe you know people or you yourself have been very strong in the materialistic point of view. Oh, I need to have the biggest car, or I need to have the most expensive car, or I need to have the biggest house, I need to be on 4 acres of land, I need to have a landscaper who takes care of everything for me, I need to be, the head of the business, I need to own a business. And now I can be an entrepreneur and I can own 5 or 6 businesses. And so on. And this all feeds into this I, me, mine and this materialism. So, in the scope of all things, we need to be in the center of all this. We can't say, oh, I can't recognize the I, me, mine. Oh, I can't recognize the materialism. Yes, I need some certain things and so on. And yes, there are some things that on the extreme of nihilism that make some sense in some way. There's a degree of freedom that comes from that. But we talk about freedom all the time in our philosophy. Where's the point where that freedom of the nihilists, comes into play with the freedom of the Buddhists or any of the other groups who might recognize freedom, or the materialists, like I said, or the eternalists and so on. So we need to be able to examine what it is that we're doing, where we're going, why we're doing it, how it is that we're doing those things, and do we need to recalibrate? Do we need to rebalance our lives to be in the center, to be in the balance of all of that? This is all part of the human condition. We can no more change our humanness, or we can't change into another being, is what I'm trying to say. We can improve who we are as a human being because there are degrees of what it is to be a human being. So we could be at a low level, who's just a materialist, who's very physical, whatever. And then there can be very intellectual, and we could say maybe that's the top, or very spiritual, and maybe that's at the top. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to be a complete human being. So I've used the other analogy of the 3-legged stool. One leg is our physical nature. The other leg is our intellectual nature. And the third leg is our spiritual nature. And what we find that without that third leg, the stool will not stand by itself. It's not self-supporting. And we find that if we're not feeling good, if we're physically not feeling good, we've hurt ourselves or we've got a disease or something like that, we can't think clearly. And if we can't think clearly, it's very difficult to be able to be spiritual, to recognize our spirituality, because we're just constantly thinking about our injury, our painfulness, and so on. Yes, Gary.
Before we get too far down the road, I need to clarify in my mind your discussion of nihilism.
Okay.
because in all my life, the things that I've studied, nihilism has been a characteristic of an existence without values. Nothing matters.
Okay.
I thought that I heard you say, and I may have misunderstood you, that a nihilist could have values, but it's never been in all the things I've studied, the things that I've heard is that they are basically, nihilism is a valueless construct. Nothing matters. There's no such thing as good or bad.
Well, I understand the point, and I've met people who consider themselves to be nihilists, but at the same time, they don't go around robbing banks and murdering people or beating them up or something like that. There is a common sense morality about them, but they really don't think that it matters. They could get away with it, but out of the fear of being punished for doing the nihilistic things that they think they can do, they created a sense of morality so they don't wind up in jail or being, in prison.
So it's about self-preservation.
Yes, it's a selfish self-preservation.
Because
does that make sense?
It does.
So if you want to look at the extreme of the nihilist, I mean, who would that be? I mean, I just looked it up in the dictionary while you were talking, and they used Hitler as an example.
Well, yes, he was absolutely a nihilist, at least in the school.
But meanwhile, he co-opted many religious things.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, he used them
to be on his side.
He used them for his advantage.
Yes.
So he created a false morality.
Yeah, he. I think it was. That's a very good point. I wish my memory was better now. I think it was a great Protestant theologian, Martin Niemöller, who was talking about Hitler, and he said something like, "First they came for the Catholics, but I was not Catholic, so I did not do anything." And then one day they came for the Jews, but I'm not Jewish, so I didn't do anything. And then one day they came for this ethnic group of people, but I was not one of them, so I didn't do anything. And then one day they came for me. And that was the construct that Niemöller used to express his profound regret and personal suffering. That as a Lutheran minister, he had looked the other way with all this suffering happen, and it was almost a nihilistic view, even though he was a minister. So I guess in the sense that you're saying that you can profess to have values, spiritual values, but yes, engage in nihilistic behavior. And Niemöller, to his profound sense of regret and personal suffering, recognized that.
Okay, yeah.
But
So my point in bringing out the four extremes is we don't want to go to any of those extremes, but we need to recognize those extremes, to guard ourselves, and also to be able to know how to work with others who are being influenced by those extremes. We just can't stick our head in the sand and not recognize other beings. Remember, everything that we do is for the benefit of others. As soon as we stop giving that up, when we start giving that up, then we go to those extremes. That's when we say the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. May my body, speech, and mind be inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones, means that I become a Buddha, and that everything I do with my body, my speech, and my mind becomes for the benefit of others, not for my benefit as an individualist or as a materialist or as an eternalist or as a nihilist. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for bringing it up so we can, hopefully put ourselves on a path to be able to think about this, to contemplate this, and for ourselves to explore, what does this mean? Look it up in 2 or 3 different dictionaries and see what the different dictionaries have to say about it, and then contemplate it yourself and so on. I mean, that's what this is all about. That's what meditation is all about, is personal investigation as a huge part of meditation. So I was talking about the 3-legged stool. So there was another philosopher who lived a little bit more than 100 years ago in India. His name was Sri Aurobindo. And he talked about the Superman. His ideal, the ideal human being, the hero, was called the Superman. That's what he called him. And the Superman had a great physical body, had a great intellectual mind, but also had a great heart, and was able to bring this all together in everything that they did as being a human being on this planet with those 3 bodies moving about doing all the things that they do. And then the story I talk about is in the 1930s in the world was this Great Depression. And in America, one of the helpful things that happened, somebody had the great idea of a comic book hero. They invented the comic book of Superman in the middle 1930s. And the Superman, I grew up with him on television when I was a kid in the 1950s. Late 1940s, 1950s. And we saw Superman on black and white TV and so on. And then later on, he came into the movies and so on. So everything that I've seen, I haven't seen maybe the most recent of the Superman films, but the last one I saw was Man of Steel, which is incredible. The metaphors that are in that encompass everything that we're talking about. And the point I'm trying to make here is that Superman never killed anybody. Superman never drew blood. Superman would use his great powers of intellect and of physicality to subdue those, to help them to transform themselves, to heal themselves from whatever confused ideas they had that was causing them to be harmful to other beings. So that's an example of a Superman who has a heart, has great physical power, has great intellectualism, but is looking at it as a whole on, looking at it and all the things holistically, looking at it all together. And so to become a complete human being for us is to do that. And we can say that in the final analysis, when we get to this 9th yana, that we find that that's what we're doing is we are becoming a complete human being. We still have to breathe. We still have to work. We still have to have family. We still need to do things around the house and so on like that. But we do it in an enlightened way. Ken Wilber, my favorite of the modern day philosophers, said, we're all enlightened already. You may not recognize it, but we've got all that wisdom within ourselves. All that power is within ourselves. And once you recognize that, that's relatively easy. The difficult thing is living an enlightened life. That's what's difficult. That's what requires our Sangha, our brother and our sisters to help us, to support us, for we to be part of that society that is helping each other and so on. And when we see that there are leakages, when we say that we've tried to create this society and there's these leakings, these ruptures that have happened, and some of this spirituality is just oozing out onto the floor and being wasted, and people don't even recognize that. But those of us that can see it, we're crying inside. We have those moments where it seems to be overwhelming. But then we rely on each other. We rely on these systems to be able to pull ourselves back together again, put a smile back on our face, and go back to work. Anybody got a comment about that? Because that is such a fundamental thing, I think. Okay.
Yeah, I'd say it can be sometimes very depressing to be aware of everything that's going on in the world.
Yes.
Yeah, so there got to be some tools to kind of get yourself back in the groove and know how to carry on.
Can you all relate to this? That, in my life, I think back, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years when I was a kid growing up or something, it seemed like, wow, everything was great. I had a lot of good fortune in my life, but it seemed like everything was really good. People looked out for each other. You didn't have to lock your car. You didn't have to lock the house. You could leave the windows open. There was all kinds of things. People weren't thinking. You go to school. We walked to school. I used to hitchhike, all these things that we can't do anymore. Why? Because there's this degree of spirituality that has leaked out of the body of society, who we were, that sense of morality or whatever, community reality, morality. Can we restore that? Can we repair that? It's not likely in my lifetime. I've only got, if I'm lucky, 20, 25 years or something like that. But those of you who are much younger, it's going to be a lot of the work that you do to help restore that, to bring it back, to guide that to your children, to your grandchildren, or to those who are those children. Maybe you don't have your own kids, but you see other kids and so on, and you help them and so on. So we need a system to be able to guide us to do that. So this path of renunciation is part of that, is being able to pull ourselves back, get our discipline together, get our direction together, and start moving in the correct direction.
Lance, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Gary was talking about nihilism earlier, and I certainly see how Hitler would be an example of that. But with the tragedies we've seen recently, I think there's also a temptation to throw your hands up and say, this is so sad, this is so tragic, there's nothing I can do about it, the world's an awful place, and be nihilistic almost to protect yourself. Do you see what I'm saying? As a means of self-preservation. So the Buddha would counsel against that as well. Is that correct? That would be a form of nihilism, to just throw up your hands and say, there's nothing we can do about it.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people over the many generations have thought that the Buddhists, kind of back off, but if you, talk with some of the teachers who are really connected, who have had some realization on their own, they're not just teachers of the books, but they're teachers of experience, will tell you that the Buddhists were great activists who would get involved. That, not just in human behavior, but in the way that we are stewards of the planet and so on, of nature and so on, this whole, global warming thing and so on. And who is the greatest of all the icons of who symbolize that is the Dalai Lama. mean, he's involved in so many of these great efforts and so on. He's an activist. He may not be out carrying signs. He's not, doesn't have to go to that degree, but he's a great teacher who's encouraging people to do those things. So yeah. So we have to guard against that there's a degree of nihilism within ourselves that we could fall into. Is that your point?
Yes, out of despair and sadness. I'm thinking of Vivaldi, obviously, but we just, I just can't take the sadness anymore. And you just disconnect and you just say nothing matters. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but look at our lives and say, well, many things pop up in your meditations, things that you haven't thought about for 20 years and so on, and good things and bad things. And the bad things, make you cringe. Oh, no, and it's hard to get rid of that. But there's been many good things you did, people that you befriended, things that you did for people, where it maybe wasn't expected. You didn't expect that you were going to do it, but you just recognized the need and you rose to the occasion, to see those things. And then to accept responsibility for them again. Some of the negative things that I've done, I wouldn't do them again, and maybe in some way I've paid a penance for it, but to understand the meaning of it, it makes me realize, oh, now I know what I did. I can feel that because I allowed it to happen to me or something like that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So we talk about in Bodhisattva, there are two aspirations, and this is something to write down. There are two aspirations that we are working toward. Aspirations are like wishes. I'm aspiring to be like this. Desires, but I always think of them as positive desires, aspirations to improve myself. If I desire to improve myself, I have a connotation, it's my personal thing. I have a connotation that I'm obsessed with it. And obsession is not a good thing. But if I have an aspiration, means I can be knocked down. I may not have the right tools, but I'm always aspiring to be moving forward. So the two aspirations of being a bodhisattva are to have liberation from suffering, to liberate myself from suffering, to liberate others from suffering. And what I find is that the more I help other beings to liberate from their suffering, the more I help myself to be liberated from my suffering. And that's a very, very important part. And to keep that in our minds and in our practices, we're reminded of that many, many times over and over again in different prayers and practices that we do to remind us of that. It's through helping others that we help ourselves. The other aspiration is the realization, the aspiration for the realization of emptiness of phenomena. Now, this is a very abstract statement. Emptiness of phenomena. And to realize that. So this is one of the characteristics of the Mahayana, the middle way teachings. So we're not going to go a lot into emptiness in this cycle of conversation. We're not going to go into a lot about phenomena in this cycle of conversation. We're trying to get through these 9 yanas, these 9 vehicles. We'll come back to this when we restart the next cycle of Buddhism 101, particularly for the people who haven't had the benefit of that yet. But what we consider to be phenomena is all this stuff around us. including ourselves, as phenomenal. We don't have concrete explanations for what all this is. We don't have concrete explanations of how it came to be. We don't have concrete explanation of who we are and what we are going to be doing tomorrow, and much less next week or our next life. So we look at all this stuff as just simply being phenomenal. I can't know what it is. Human beings have their limits. And recognizing that limit or those limits is fundamental in being able to free ourselves to be able to enjoy what it is that we can recognize and what we can take responsibility for. But there is this phenomenal nature. We don't know truly about the Big Bang. We don't know truly about how karma works. You know, we can see that we can observe that there is this phenomena that is happening and so on, and we can use it to predict things and so on, but we don't absolutely know. So this phenomena is all a fabrication. And what fabricates it is our mind, ourselves. It is the conventions of our rationality that we all agree on. That when we're first born, we're just a complete slate. We're completely ignorant. We don't know anything. And we begin to build on our relationships with our mother and our father, our caretakers, our family, the room that we're living in, the food that we eat. All these things are building up this body of appearances that are all phenomenal in their absolute nature, and what they are is just phenomenal. We don't know where they came from. We don't know where they're really going. We don't know why they're here. And we just come to be able to, we see ourselves in this midst of what we call this emptiness of true nature, this absolute true nature. What is permanent? What do you think in your life is permanent? What do you look at that you can say is permanent? What can you hold in your hands that is permanent? It's a hypothetical question right now, but the answer is nothing. Everything is temporary. We are temporary. So this aspiration that the Bodhisattva has is to be able to apprehend this realization of emptiness of phenomena. And we call this generally, this is the obscuration of wisdom, because our humanness is telling us, oh, I can know everything. We have this built-in arrogance that I know. And as human beings, I know. We can build this satellite with all these cameras, and we can send it up in space, and goodness knows how much it costs, but we're going to unlock the secrets of the universe with that camera. And we're so arrogant, we think we can do it. But isn't that a very myopic view of what we know to be this great phenomenal celestial cosmos? Goodness knows what it is, but we think that we can find out. I mean, to me, it seems like the epitome of arrogance. If we were to be able to shift our point of view and go a quarter of the way through this universe that we call it and look at it from another direction, it might look totally different to us if we could do that. And one of our meditations, or many of our meditations, can be that space traveler and put yourself out there and look back at the earth and look at all the other planets and stars and so on and say, well, maybe I'm going to be born on that star one day, or maybe I'll become that star. All those stars are just figments of our imagination. So there's many things that can tie into this. We can talk about all these abstract appearances that we have some agreement on, and some, tantalize us to have a conversation and so on, and say, oh, I think this and I think that, oh, that can't be true, I think it this way, and so on. But we can all agree that this stone is the color blue, and this wheel is the color brown, and it goes round, and so on. All these everyday common things, we agree on these appearances. And it's all just part of our mind. And our mind is phenomenal nature itself. So that's one of the things that we have to recognize and release. In the beginning, we talked about that all this is the right view, is the view of freedom. Freedom from all these preconceived ideas, freedom from all these appearances, freedom from all this phenomenal nature, freedom from emptiness, freedom from all of this and so on, freedom from conceptual thought. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And you may ask yourself, well, why do I want to do that? And that's a very good question. And nobody can give you the answer to that. You have to say, oh, well, I've tried everything else, but I'm here trying to understand, what seems to be the highest philosophy that I've been exposed to so far. And here they're telling me to get over it and get beyond it all. It's just all a figment of my imagination. Why do I want to do that? So these are questions that the Bodhisattva is endeavoring to answer, or to be able to abide within the non-conceptuality of it. And we call that the absolute, for lack of a better word. And we explore this much more later on. So these two aspirations are the aspiration of liberation from suffering. What is it that makes us suffer? What is the immediate thing that makes us suffer? Are our emotions. And what are our emotions made up of? Our emotions are made up of hatreds, made up of jealousies, made up of ignorances, made up of desires, made up of prideful greediness. That's those 5 basic poisons are what makes up what we say the 84,000 emotions. In the stories in the scriptures, it says that during the time of the Buddha, that as he traveled around northern India, that he recognized, or he was exposed to, or people came to him with 84,000 different emotions. But he had a teaching for every one of those 84,000 emotions. So those 84,000 can then be subsumed into, 10,000 of these and 10,000 of those and 15,000 of these and so on. And then those can be subsumed down into, 2,000 of these and 2,000 of those and so on like that. But it all comes down to these 5 basic poisons. Ignorance, attachment or desire, hatred, greediness or pride, and jealousy or envy. Those are the 5 poisons that make up all these emotions. And if we didn't have these emotions, would we still be suffering? So that's part of the investigation. Find out what is causing those roots, or rather those poisons, to manifest within ourselves, that they become emotions. Now we talk about that we have good emotions. Oh, I'm so emotional. I'm in love with my wife. I love my children. I love my house, all these things, but all these things are temporary. Remember, all this stuff is phenomenon. And I'm thinking it's permanent. Bam, now all of a sudden, I got false emotions. Emotions that just don't make sense because they're not real. When we talk about existence, what exists? All this stuff is phenomenal. It's temporarily existent. None of it is permanent. What's permanent? Is this vibration that is going through all of us that we talk about, that's what we share? Is the soul, is that what it is? Is that permanent? Is there this vibration that is keeping, that our hearts are all keeping rhythm to? Is that permanent? Is our mind permanent? These are all questions of the spiritualist. So the Bodhisattva, the holy enlightened being, is focusing on giving himself or herself the opportunity to be able to suss all that out. This is the path of renunciation at this point. We're renouncing all the confusing things to be able to give ourselves the space and time, the wherewithal, to be able to go through this in a systematic way. And this is the beauty of the Buddhism. Buddha, when the Buddha lived 2,600 years ago and he attained enlightenment, he will tell the story about it in a few weeks, but when he attained enlightenment, he says, nobody's going to believe this. How can I tell anybody this? I can barely believe it myself, that I've attained this level of enlightenment. What am I aware of? What have I enlightened myself to, and so on? And he's beseeched by these 5 friends who follow him around, asking him, oh, please, we know you are the Buddha now. Please tell us, what is enlightenment? How do we get that? And finally, he sits them down and he says, I don't know what to tell you except how I attained it. And it's up for you to adapt that to your life and see if it works for you. He said, there's many different paths. This is one path. The path that I teach is the Dharma. There's many other Dharmas, but the Buddha Dharma is very rich in experience and so on, and gives us so much to be able to understand. It gives us a structure to be able to understand what it is to be a human being. And the Buddhist uses that to be able to build this awareness, only to, at some point, just let that go, because all that is just appearances. All that are just rationalizations on rationalizations on rationalizations. And what are we doing? We're preparing ourselves to be liberated. What does it mean to be liberated? Does it mean to give up our body when we die? Or is that liberation? When we die, our physical body and our intellect are over, vanished, never to come back. But that spirituality, that big mind that we call it, Is that permanent? Does that stay? Is that something that we're trying to understand and to recognize? Is that what the liberation is for? And how do we do that? How do we prepare? If that's the real liberation, how do I prepare for that? Well, every meditation is a death and a rebirth. Here we are sitting here together for the past hour and a half or whatever, and you might have heard at least one thing of something that you never heard before, or you had some thought that something that we said sparked a fresh thought in your mind that you've never had before. So in this way, you've had a death. You're not the same person that you were an hour and a half ago. And when this is over, when this session is over, you're going to get up off of wherever it is that you're sitting, and you're going to be reborn again with this new awareness, this new integral part of your thought patterns, of your mind, now to put into the equation of who you are. So in that way, we're going through a death and a rebirth. Meditation is the same thing, but it's much more concentrated. And that you go in with maybe you have some kind of an expectation of clarity, or an expectation of release of worry or something like that. And you go through this process, this repeatable process. And maybe you're able to achieve a level that you were looking for, what that expectation was, because there's a systematic way of doing it. And if I do this system, I know that I'm going to come out of this with a calmness, with a mindfulness. So then you do this practice, and then you come out of this now with a meditative mind that is transformative, and you're a new person. It's like being born again. What do I do now with the rest of my life with this new point of view? So every meditation is a rehearsal for our death, for our physical death. In our philosophy, we say we've been born many times. Where were we before we were born? We also say we've died many times. Where do we go when we die? Does that beg the question? Is where we go when we die and where are we before we were born, is that the same place? Is that pure spirit? Is that the spirit world? So that's something we will come back to many times. So it's the path of the Bodhisattva that is doing this. And it's doing this for the benefit of others. This is another hallmark of what the Bodhisattva is. It's not a Shravaka or a Pratyeka Buddha who may be doing some of these things as selfish, as awareness, as enlightenment, but in their philosophy, they're not even introduced to these ideas. Emptiness is not part of their vernacular. Phenomenal nature is not part of their vernacular. They don't look at that. They don't look at it that way. But in Mahayana, it's like opening up a door. It's like going through the ceiling of the Hinayana, and now you enter into now this Mahayana, and now there's this great big spaciousness that seems endless. So there's a lot more that we can talk about, all these details, and you can look it up. I sent some things to you a couple of weeks ago. If you need it sent again, there's a particular website that is really good. There's many books that are written on this and so on. This is a means. What we're trying to do is to introduce you to the book of life. This is the table of contents, the 9 yanas of what it is to become enlightened, of what it is to become a Buddha, what we call a Buddha, the awakened one. So any one of these sessions is not meant to be so comprehensive that it's going to, turn on that light of awareness all at one fell swoop. Maybe you're ripe for that. Maybe it could. Everything's possible in this phenomenal world. So coming back again to these 2 aspirations, because this is bedrock, is number 1 is the liberation from suffering, which is overcoming the afflictive emotions. Now, saying it a different way, the afflictive emotions, because these emotions afflict us as if we have some kind of disease, some kind of illness. They condition us so that we're like in prison. That's how powerful they are. And by the time we get to the Bodhisattva path, remember we've gone through the Shravaka path, the Pratyeka Buddha, and then we come to the practitioner, then we come to the yogi, yogini. And by the time we get to the Bodhisattva path, now we will have a handle on the causes of the emotions and how to control the emotions. So we still have all that work to do to get to that point. But now you're getting a sense of the table of contents of the book that gets us to there. So we say that in the Mahayana, there are 2 truths. There's the relative truth, this phenomenal truth, that all this stuff is existent. We can see it, we can touch it, we can taste it, we can hear it, all these things. Yeah, it's all real. It's all existent. However, it's all relative and it's all temporary. So getting through that is a huge breakthrough. And then the second of the 2 truths is that there is this absolute nature, this true nature that is beyond our conception. We can't talk about it. We can't express it. However, we can experience it. How do we experience it? We experience it through the transcendent. That there is a pathway. We talk that we use, I don't know what the number is these days, 15% of our brain power, something like that. There's 85% of our brain power that they say that we don't use in our everyday consciousness. Okay, so let's say that's true. So how do we get to that 85%? So the meditational people, the spiritualists would say it's through the meditation that you unlock that doorway that gets you into that 85%. And that is mind-blowing. So mind-blowing, it has no words for it. There's no way to express it. It's just an experience. So this absolute nature, what we term as the absolute nature, is that categorization of it. We can go that far to say that's what it is, but you got to experience it. I can't tell you what it is. How do you know that you've had it? Because you can see that your life has changed. You can see that your attitude has changed. You see that your behavior has changed. You see that all these things start making sense. You begin to see all these connection points. What is the definition of spirituality? There's many definitions. You can look it up in the dictionary, but one of them, and probably about the 6th or 7th down in the list of a good dictionary, is going to be connection. Spirituality is connection. connection with all this phenomenal nature, and connection with the absolute. It won't say it that way, but that's what we say. That's the experience that we begin to realize, that we're connected to all these things. We're spiritually connected to all these things. So again, all this is part of the middle way. All this is part of the Mahayana. The hero is the Bodhisattva of this. Okay, anybody got any questions or comments about this? You want to stand up and stretch, get a drink of water, take a couple minutes? Anna's out the door. Look, that's why I'm teasing.
I really
Anybody,
need to stand
anybody,
up.
anybody stand on your head? Anybody? Curtis, what do you think about this?
I'm just enjoying taking it in. The big question, Lance.
You're enjoying it then?
Yes. Yes, to reflect on issues of basic meaning of human life, of what's important, of what really constitutes meaningful life and good life. If we don't do those things, we're not really using our precious human life to wonder, to be more than just people that eat, go to work, sleep. So when a group is together philosophizing, trying to think of what's wise and good, that is very meaningful.
Okay, thank you. Brendan, you got your microphone on. What do you have any comments?
I was listening to Curtis and I was thinking about the Buddha's tremendous humility. To your point that the realization of the emptiness of phenomenon, I don't think the Buddha ever said, I've got it all figured out. I know what the universe is expanding into. I know why there's something rather than nothing. He had this humility that you mentioned, Lance, where he said, hey, if this doesn't work for you, it's up to you. This worked for me. And it just seems like that's a humility that the Buddha had that many monotheistic traditions lack. And I shouldn't probably say that, but.
Well, no, that's right. I think you're completely correct. And the part of that is, in the essence of those monotheistic traditions, may have the essence of that teaching that you just were relating, but it's been stepped on so many times that it's become something other than that essence.
Yes, I agree.
They've used that to manipulate other beings. Alex, you turned on your camera. What do you think?
I felt like I needed more light,
Oh.
more enlightenment in my room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I kind of like your pointing comment on launching satellites and how still little we know with all this equipment flying in the space. And indeed, from scientists' point of view, the greatest secret is how little can we really learn from all this experimentation. We're happy to get the money to satisfy our own curiosity about the world, but we all recognize that there's going to be a limit where we say, okay, that's the end of our, cause and result, chain of events, and eventually something we have to accept as it is, and stop this dialogue. What next? Or why, and just to get to the root of things to whatever ability we can without getting trapped in these questions.
That's very good. They call that the suchness of the mind. It's such it is. This is what it, this is as far as we can go.
But yeah, and I'm amazed, like getting recently learned more about neurobiology or neuroscience, how much just by means of meditation and introspection was achieved, several thousand years ago. And it all rings to be very consistent with what we know now, or what we're learning now.
Anna, how about you? How does this land on you?
I think I'm sort of in a place where a lot of this is sort of new knowledge to me, and I'm a sponge, and I haven't quite formed a whole lot of, thoughts, I guess.
Okay.
I have noticed that meditation and learning these prayers has been beneficial.
Mhm.
And I think I really just want to continue developing my practice and trying to spend more time, coming to events and learning.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's very healthy. Thank you. Tommy, how about you? Are you still with us? We see your name there. There you are. You have a comment?
About relative truth or true nature. I don't know. I do like the idea of a true nature mind, a mind that's unfettered by thoughts of the past and the future, and is rooted in the present. And I believe that the belief is that from this unfettered mind, the true Buddha nature comes from. So it's like your intuitive mind. I like that idea.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any of you other wise guys who've been with us in 101 many times? Anybody have a comment? Gary or Tom? Zara? So I think it's great to have new people with us, Anna and Brendan and Tommy, with us right now is really good. Everybody else has been through 101 at least once, maybe 2-3 times, something like that. And so it's good to experience it for ourselves who have been doing this for a long time, to look at it through the eyes of new people. It always gives us a fresh perspective on things, and so we appreciate everything that you say, and nothing that what you say is going to be wrong, because it's all based on experience, and what we hope to be able to do is altogether grow our experiences.
I had a comment more than a question, Lance.
Okay.
You do realize what you've taught tonight can be spread over the next 6 months of teaching. You put out quite a bit tonight. I mean,
Well, again, it's yeah.
yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff, you know.
Well, I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, but again, it's the point of being able to, give the table of contents.
Yeah, I mean, just on the teachings on the four extremes, you can go
Yeah.
for weeks and weeks and weeks, and the two aspirations, you can go weeks and weeks, and the two truths, you can go for months, and the emptiness of phenomenon, you can teach that for the next 10 years.
Well, from a practical point of view, do you think that this approach is helpful by giving a zoomed out kind of a introduction, and then later on zoom in when we need to, but to create a context in which this is working?
It's wonderful that all the ideas that you're putting out there, I really hope people take the time to look into these things on their own, because Lance is giving a wonderful, wonderful outline of teachings that, that you'd have to go for years of schooling to get. But, I mean, through his wisdom and, his compassion, he's really given everybody really a great taste. Yeah, we should be really thankful.
Well, thank you, but it's it's the collective work of many beings and so on. So thank you. So let me try and end the session by saying that, what is it that we can see that we've made some progress? What changes? So what changes is when we get up off the cushion, so to speak. We have our meditation. We go through this birth and death that I was talking about, or this death and birth. Then we get up off the cushion, and now we go back out into the world, and we do the things that we normally do every day and so on. How does that change? How do I recognize what I've been able to absorb and to be able to then assimilate into my life and so on? So it's our conduct. It's our conduct that changes. It's our attitude that changes. So we talk about that there are 6 transcendent perfections, or in Sanskrit, it's called the paramitas. So these paramitas, these perfections are human qualities that begin to develop, and they begin to develop spontaneously. We don't say, oh, I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work on that. They work together holistically. So just to be aware of these things is really good at this point. And but we say that these are the 3 mind trainings of the Bodhisattva. That the Bodhisattva who's on this pathway now, after the part of being a yogi, the part of being a yogini, now entering into this path that is cutting through the afflictive emotions and becoming a Bodhisattva, are the 3 mind trainings of being a Bodhisattva. So the 3 mind trainings are, first, the moral ethics, having a moral ethics of being a Bodhisattva. And maybe it's a little tighter, it's a little more defined, it's a little more, I don't want to say rigid, but it's a little more purified. This morality is more purified. It doesn't have some of the allowances that we make as an ordinary person. So it becomes a little bit more focused. And within those 3, the mind training of moral ethics is our generosity, how we spend our time, how we spend our energy, how we spend our resources, and being able to help other beings. How we engage with other beings for the sake of this spirituality. And what that moral ethics is, and then our patience. begins to grow. We find our patience, and things are happening not just in a vertical sense, but they're happening in a broader horizontal sense. We're growing in both ways, and a deeper understanding. And so out of that comes a greater tolerance for confusion, both within ourselves and with others. We need to have patience with ourselves so that we don't if we make a mistake, we say, okay, I made a mistake. I can fix that. I know what I need to do. I recognize that. And if it's somebody else, that you have patience with them. If you take up working with other people, which is what we do as part of being a bodhisattva, the way in which we hone our edge is through our interaction with other people. We're not isolating ourselves. We're engaging with other people on purpose. And then the fourth thing of that morality is our perseverance, our diligence to keep at it, because it's very easy, in the lesser levels to become discouraged and to succumb to the pressures of ordinary life responsibilities and so on like that, not having our priorities, really well defined. But by the time we get here, our priorities are getting well defined, and we're beginning to say, okay, this is really important to me, and I will give other things up in order to be able to have the time, energy, and resources to be able to develop this as much as I possibly can. So the diligence, the perseverance to do that. So those are the mind trainings of morality. And then there's the mind training of meditative concentration, really getting into what it is to be able to learn how to meditate, how to think, how to contemplate, what the process is there. There is a process, and it has a very distinct order to it in our system. There's other systems that may do it slightly different, but for us to be able to do what we do, there is this prescribed method. You can take this method, once you become familiar with it, you can modify it to what you need to do yourself. But in the beginning, we need to follow the instructions because it comes with a great deal of experience. It comes with a great deal of wisdom that has helped to develop this and so on. So we have to trust in that. So we develop this meditative concentration, how to do this. And we find that what in the beginning is very organized and very structured, as we progress along the path and become more familiar with it, we just slip right into it. We may be doing things and we come in to meditate and we just go through all that basic fundamental stuff very, very quickly, and we get right to the meditation point. And then we find that what we're able to do is at the end is to take that meditation with us. We say we take the meditation with us when we get up off the cushion. So there's meditation and there's post-meditation. And the post-meditation, there becomes no difference between the meditation on the cushion and meditation off the cushion. So that takes work, takes practice. It's a lifestyle. It's taking us lifetimes to get to where we are now, and we're not done, most of us anyway. And so we have lifetimes to come, maybe not as Lance or as Tom or Gary or Anna or whomever, whatever, not who we are, but as human beings and being part of the human condition. And until we can liberate ourselves from that, we're kind of bound into that. We have to accept that responsibility. So all that is all part of the second mind training of meditative concentration. And then the last one, the third, is the mind training and wisdom awareness. The mind training of wisdom awareness. And what that means is recognizing all this as all wisdom and being aware that all this fits together, is all part of the same thing. There is no duality. We create the duality. We allow the duality to manifest. And what we need to do is to be able to recognize that all this is all the same. It's part of the equanimity that we talk of in bodhicitta. The equanimity, that all this is the same, and seeing that the path has all these disparate things on there, and being able to develop the mindfulness of that wisdom awareness and how to work with that, how to make that who we are, that we become the Superman or the Superwoman. Not only do we have a great physical body, not only do we have a great intellectual mind, but we have a great true nature, our heart center, our spirituality. So as we progress along the path of becoming a bodhisattva, and we recognize these three mind trainings, as we employ the techniques of the mind training, then we see our conduct changing. We see ourselves becoming happier. We see ourselves becoming more radiant, other people recognizing that. Much more enjoyable, all these things. So I think that's where we'll leave it for tonight. Does anybody have any other thoughts or comments? We need to do our dedication, so we're not leaving yet. Okay. So just to refresh everyone's memory that when we do these teachings, or when we do a study for ourselves, a contemplation, or we do a practice, either in a group or by ourselves, there's three fundamental elements that we need to use. The first is setting our motivation. So we did that with our opening prayers. The motivation is for the benefit of others. Then we do our practice, we do our teaching, we do our study, we receive the teaching, whatever. That's the main body of the time that we spend in the session. And then when that's over, when that's done, now the third part is we dedicate whatever merit of the wisdom and the skillful means, the method that we have learned, that transformation that we've gone through our death and rebirth, whatever that merit that we have accumulated as a result of that, we're dedicating to the enlightenment of other beings. So we're always conscious of helping other beings, of being for the benefit of other beings. So now we're taking it, we're not selfishly holding on to it and say, oh man, I just had a great realization. This is great. I'm so much better than anybody else now, because they don't realize that. But no, we are taking that and we are sharing that with beings. We are dedicating that to other beings. So now we need to do that dedication. So if we go back to our prayer books, and we go to so if you don't mind, Gary, I'm going to finish up with this, please. So we go to page 21 and 22. And this is the dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgun. And Lord Jigdan Sumgun is the founder of our particular lineage. Teacher to disciple, who becomes a teacher, who has disciples who become teachers, and so on. So this particular lineage of the Drikung Kagyu is 800 years of unbroken lineage. And Lord Jigdan Sumgun founded this over 800 years ago and continues to today. And so it becomes a template for ourselves in understanding the vicissitudes of life. the changes in life that happen, because this lineage has gone through many changes. Sometimes there's been a golden period of generations where everything has been wonderful, everything's fallen into place, great things have happened and so on. But then there's times of internal conflict. And maybe it was between the monastics, or maybe it was between the lay people, or maybe it was between the lay people and the monastics. There's been all these changes, all these vicissitudes, all these dynamics that have happened. And how it is that it's withstood all those changes is a testament to the teachings, is a testament to what the system of Buddhism is all about. So this prayer really encapsulates the way in getting through that. This is the dedication. So please, everybody, recite this along with me. We'll go through it clearly and distinctly. And if you have questions at the end, we can talk about it. So so this first stanza is identifying some of the lineage masters and so on. So you may be unfamiliar with the names. If you have questions about it, I'll be glad to answer what I can for you. So we begin now. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root, and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate root of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you very much. So I think a lot of what we said tonight is in this dedication prayer, isn't it?
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. So next week we get into the path of purification. Okay.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome, Anna. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
Lance. I'm really happy I
Thank you.
joined today.
Good. Thank you, Alex.
Good.
I'm always glad when you do join us.
Perfect overview to
Thank
sum
you.
up.
Thank you. Alex.
Thank
is
you,
it?
Lance.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
See you next time.
Brendan, thank
See
you.
you, Lance.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Tommy,
Thank you so much for today.
you're welcome. Thank you very much.
I'm
And,
Curtis, Brendan. Nice to meet you.
Curtis.
Great to meet you, Curtis.
Oh, Curtis, I see you sent me a bunch of videos, so thank you.
I'm sorry, it's what you want. It's pretty much what I got. I saw no need to retape things that covered the ground of basically capturing the weekend.